And I was much thinner. Things have gone down since then.
All rise. All rise. The Honorable George I. Wolf presiding. May be seated. Okay, we're here for the sentencing of Mr. Romero. Any preliminary matter before we get started, Counsel?
You may, Pro Tem.
You may.
The way we're going to conduct that is I'm going to hear from the state first, then from the defense, and then if the state wishes, then rebuttal, I'll hear from them. So at this point, let me hear from the state.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, before I make my remarks and my argument, there are three people who wish to speak to the court. Ms. Julie Benner, Officer Benner's wife, will be the first to address the court.
Thank you, Your Honor. My name is Julie Benner. I'm Officer Gregg Benner's wife. On May the 25th, 2015, Gregg and I kissed as he left for work. I never thought as he closed the door that would be the last time I would kiss him, hear his voice, or see him alive. It was the last time I would touch his warm body. By the time the sun had set, Andrew Romero had changed my life forever. Andrew Romero feloniously took from me not only my husband, he stole from me my best friend, my confidant, and the man that cared for me for my many everyday medical needs. He denied me my sole support. He robbed me of a future that Gregg and I had spent many hours talking about and planning. Since May the 25th, I have endured the pain that no one should ever have to endure. The pain of explaining the horrific murder of a father, grandfather, brother, uncle, co-worker, and friend. I have had to make life-altering decisions of every aspect of Gregg's death, from planning a funeral to learning to cope with a life without him. Every night since May the 25th has been cold and lonely. They're filled with nightmares of Gregg being killed and seeing his lifeless body. Nightmares filled with me begging him for him to wake from his hospital bed. I had to sell our family home because I didn't have the physical ability to maintain the property. I have to depend on friends for my transportation needs because I can't drive. There is not one facet of my life that Gregg did not touch to make sure I had what was needed and I was comfortable. I am now dependent on others in Gregg's absence. Daily, I am reminded not so much of Gregg's life and the good he did within the community we lived. I live with the pain and reminders of the manner that Andrew Romero so lightly took the value of Gregg's life. That Andrew Romero, without any hesitation, pulled the trigger on a gun, not just once, but 4 times, to ensure that he was successful at killing Gregg. Gregg has no voice to tell anyone what really happened to him, no voice to tell anyone about his family, his dreams, or his passions in life. Andrew Romero saw to it that Gregg is forever silent. While preparing for this trial, I again relived every moment of Gregg's death. As I have been Gregg's silent support and sat in court, I again relived in vivid detail Gregg's murder. You will all go home to your family and friends. Life as you know it will continue. You will enjoy smiles of your loved ones and friends. You will touch them and feel their warmth. You will hear their voices. You will experience their smell. I will never again have that luxury. Now close your eyes and imagine what I will go home and experience. I have lost all the family I have in this community. When I leave here, I will go home to an empty house. I will not see Gregg's smile. I will not be able to touch Gregg or feel his warmth. I will not hear Gregg's voice. I will never again experience Gregg's smell. You see, I am now alone. Andrew Romero sentenced me to a life without Gregg, a life alone. I ask you that you sentence Andrew Romero to the maximum sentence that is allowed. Sincerely.
Your Honor, next to address the court will be Officer Lana Elder. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, okay. And after that will be Captain Bowie, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor, for the opportunity. Gregg Benner and I met the first day when he tested for the police department, for Rio Rancho Police Department. Gregg wasn't like everybody else. In fact, he was quite the opposite. He was outgoing, he was a lot of fun, and of course his British accent intrigued me. So we became instant friends. We got to the point where we knew what each other was thinking when we worked together. We had a lot of fun doing our jobs. We'd skip down the street, go places and have something to eat and just laugh about different things. As a result of our friendship and having dinner with our spouses one night, Gregg asked me to be his family representative if anything happened to him. He was always prepared for things as he was a U.S. veteran of the Air Force. I reluctantly agreed to this request, thinking that it would never happen. I never believed this would ever happen. Over time, after I agreed to his request, Gregg told me many details about the things that he did for Julie, and you heard about some of those things, her medical issues, just little things that she needed to do that we take for granted every day. On May 25th, 2015, as I was going to work, I heard Gregg making a traffic stop. Nothing unusual. It's time for him to go home. I'm thinking, you need to go home, Gregg. Then the unthinkable happened. I heard Mr. Stalter's voice, which I didn't know it was him at the time, holler, "Officer down," on every police radio. As myself and other fellow officers responded, I heard it was Gregg's name on the radio as the officer who was down. Even today, that memory weighs heavy on me. That was the absolute unimaginable. As I approached, I saw my best friend lying in the street, clinging to life and unresponsive, and the EMTs were getting ready to take him away. Andrew Romero was only a traffic stop for him. Gregg was respectful to him. Gregg was respectful to and honest with you. Gregg was simply going to arrest you with dignity as a human being because that's the kind of police officer and man that he was. Andrew Romero knew he had a warrant for his arrest. Andrew lied to Gregg. Andrew disobeyed Gregg. Andrew laughed at Gregg. And then he shot Officer Gregg Benner. And then he left him there to die. He didn't even call for help for somebody. He drove away and left him lying in the middle of the street. He shot him. He took him away from all of us. Gregg was our friend, our police officer, and he was my best friend. We all tried to do what we could for him. My fellow officers, EMT, fire staff, emergency and medical people did all they could, but there was nothing more they could do. They pronounced him dead, and he was gone. I will never hear his laughter or his British accent again. Now was the time I had to fulfill my promise to Gregg. You heard about all those things that she needs. I now had to be the person she had to call upon and depend upon for many of the simple things. And it wasn't just me. It was Debbie Hensley. It was Linda Johnson. It was Mike and Noreen, John and Irene. All of us helped her do along the things that Gregg did. That one person, Gregg, did all of those things for her. We made it through all of this. Her family was here, Barry and Peter, Tracy, Tanya. All of them came as much as they could. Karen eventually came here. Carrie came here. We could all only be there for Julie. Through the year, I've listened to her talk about her fears, her nightmares, and personal feelings as she has gone through all of this. But she has also gained strength working tirelessly to bring justice to Andrew Romero. Judge, Andrew Romero took the life of my best friend, a police officer in our community, a U.S. Air Force veteran, and a man who always did the right thing. I've never experienced this type of tragic, sudden loss, and it changed my life and the way I work. Several nights I sat and cried from his absence. I replayed the scene over and over that night. Every day since Gregg was shot and left to die in the street, I remember how Andrew Romero and Tabitha Littles had no remorse for what they did to my friend. During the trial, I watched the arrogant Andrew Romero scoff and find amusement in the videos and photographs of my friend laying in the street. Andrew Romero, in my estimation, had no regard for human life when he pulled the trigger and murdered my friend Gregg over a mere traffic offense. I've been handed a life sentence at the hand of Andrew Romero, seeing Julie live the rest of her life without her forever. Justice was served on September 23rd when the jury reached a verdict of guilty on all counts. I pray that you, Judge Eichwald, will consider the loss of Gregg Benner's family, friends, and the Rio Rancho Police Department and the community that he so valiantly loved and served. Thank you, sir.
Your Honor, thank you for the opportunity to speak before the court. We'll try to convey the best I can some of the sentiments of the Rio Rancho Police Department and how this has affected us. In preparing for this, I thought of maybe addressing Andrew Romero, but as Officer Elder has pointed out, has shown no remorse. I don't think he has the capacity to understand what he's done. Instead, I will address the court. I will try to convey the message not only of the Rio Rancho Police Department, but of victims that really haven't been emphasized and that haven't really been given its due attention throughout this. On May 25th, 2015, Memorial Day, I was at home with my family, enjoying the evening, enjoying the holiday, when I received a phone call from one of my lieutenants telling me that we had an officer down. I asked him who it was. He told me it was Officer Benner, and immediately my mind began to race of what happened. I thought maybe it was a traffic crash. I thought maybe he had been run over on a traffic stop accidentally or something to that effect. He told me that it was by gunfire and that the suspect was outstanding. I couldn't put my uniform on fast enough to get out of the house. I put on my uniform. I kissed my wife and my son goodbye. I told them I loved them and headed out the door to see where I could be helpful. I arrived on scene to find a lot of our police officers of the Rio Rancho Police Department, emergency medical personnel, citizens, all looking for answers of what had just happened and all trying to come to grips of what needed to be done next. I understood that we had a person on the loose that had just shot a police officer. And at that particular time, we didn't necessarily know who that person was, but I understood the magnitude of it. I knew that we had to get this person into custody because anyone who would shoot a police officer is certainly a threat to anyone else in the community. I assumed the role of an instant commander and started addressing people out there in order to try to coordinate this search effort, coordinate all the different agencies that showed up in order to get this person into custody. And I saw some amazing things while I was there of our police officers and the things that they did, and I could spend hours describing how they stood up to the task. I had a sergeant, which I hold in very high regard, a close friend of mine, ask only to pause for a moment to wash the blood of Officer Benner off his hand before he took on the assignment that I gave him. Officers performed amazingly that evening in order to try to come together and to bring this person to justice. I had an officer who was just overwhelmed with guilt because he was the last person to see Officer Benner alive. And in the midst of all of this, I had to pause and counsel him and explain to him that he was not the one responsible. He felt responsible that he had seen him, the last one to see him alive, and he had went on to other portion of town and conducted his own traffic stop. And I reassured him that there was no other person responsible than the person that shot Officer Benner. And at the time, I was still optimistic. I thought that I hadn't gotten word yet that he had passed away. I was optimistic. My last information I received is that he was on the way to the hospital. So it was within my first 20 to 30 minutes on scene that I was approached by my Deputy Chief Stephen Beckett, to tell me that Nigel hadn't made it. And I swallowed hard. And I know I had a job to do. And things just became very real in that we needed to get this person off the street. And again, I could go on for the days and weeks and the years to follow about all of the emotions that I've seen within the Rio Rancho Police Department. What I would like to address today, again, is those victims that haven't really been properly recognized. And I can probably describe it best with this story. I was leaving the police station, and the days to follow, we were planning for Officer Benner's funeral, and we were trying to put together the best honors that we could for him. And we had long days and many meetings at the office, and it was about 5 o'clock in the evening. I was heading home, eager to get home to my family as I was exhausted. And as I left the police station and turned the corner, there was a home on the corner that had all of these blue ribbons, and there was a lady that was actively out there tying these blue ribbons around her home. And I knew what it meant. I knew that she was showing her support for law enforcement. And I turned around. I couldn't just pass that by without addressing this lady. And I pulled my police car in front of her home. I got out. I was in full uniform. And as I approached this lady, she looked so sad. She looked defeated. I approached her. She held on to me. She put her head on my shoulder and just began to cry. This lady is sobbing on my shoulder. I'd never met this lady. This lady didn't know Officer Benner. But she knew that one of her police officers was murdered. She knew that one of her police officers in her community that was there to protect her was slain by someone. We now know that that's Andrew Romero. And as this lady stood and cried on my shoulder for, I don't know what it must have been, a minute, she gathered herself, stepped back, maybe slightly embarrassed. She was kind of wiping the tears out of her eyes. She showed all that humility in front of her 3 children. And I found myself, full of grief as I was, still trying to comfort this person of the community, realizing that that was her police officer as well. And we've seen a lot of examples of that in our community. The night following the incident, we had a beautiful candlelight vigil. The community came out by the masses, and we had words of support, hugs, tears. It was amazing. And then in days following that, after we laid Officer Benner to rest, and the procession went through the city of Rio Rancho, thousands of people came out, waving American flags, thin blue line flags, children with homemade signs showing their love and their support for the family and the Rio Rancho Police Department. And those are the people that are victimized in this as well. The community lost one of their police officers. Andrew Romero murdered one of theirs. Now, on a very personal level, I love my police officers for the Rio Rancho Police Department. I've been here for 22 years. I love what they stand for, I love what they believe in, and I love what they're able and willing to do. And our uniform is a symbol of that. And when I was in court a couple of weeks ago, to see our uniform held up, which Officer Benner did his best to honor so well, soaked with blood, my patch, my uniform, our uniform. He desecrated our uniform. He doesn't deserve to be amongst the community. I ask that you sentence him to the maximum allowed, that he would never be allowed in our community once again to harm anyone else in our community or our police officers. Thank you for your time, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Your Honor, I don't know that I can be any more eloquent than those that have just addressed you, but I do want to make a brief argument for not only the mandatory life without parole, but I'm going to ask that you sentence him to consecutive sentences on all the remaining charges. The 2 tamperings with evidence in a capital crime, 3rd-degree felonies, carrying 3 years, shooting from a motor vehicle causing great bodily harm or death, a 2nd-degree felony, conspiracy to commit armed robbery, another 3rd-degree felony, aggravated fleeing, 4th-degree felony, and concealing ID, a misdemeanor, for a total of 20 and a half years less 1 day. And of course, that's just on the underlying charges. You know, Judge, you've heard me make this argument before you, but as you're well aware, there are 3 purposes to sentencing. One is rehabilitation. He gave that up a long time ago. He gave that up when he shot Officer Benner in cold blood and left him to die. And he was so concerned that he ditched the vehicle, went and got another ride, and committed another armed robbery. The second purpose of sentencing is retribution. Retribution is Latin for giving back what's due. And in this case, as you've heard from his family, you can see from the community, you can never, ever truly give back what's due to this man. He took away not only from Julie, not only from his family, not only from the Rio Rancho Police Department, not only from all law enforcement, but from this community. And this community, anytime a police officer is killed, for no reason, our community becomes a little less safe. One of the things that amazed me, Your Honor, when I first looked at this case, and particularly the lapel cam from Officer Gabe Sanchez, was how they were able, the Rio Rancho Police Department was able to go from working on their fallen colleague, Nigel's blood on their hands, to taking care of business. Because that's the kind of law enforcement officers we have in Rio Rancho. And our community, as Captain Bowie has said, has come together to honor not only Officer Benner and the Rio Rancho Police Department, but to honor what we stand for. And Your Honor, in this case, the third purpose of sentencing is just as important, and that is deterrence. We were lucky that we had courageous eyewitness citizens that had the courage to come forward, not because they wanted their 15 minutes of fame, because they saw an officer down, they wanted to help, and they came in and took their time because it's the right thing to do. And having spoken to them, I know they feel it's not nearly enough, because we can never bring Officer Benner back. I'm asking the judge, Your Honor, to sentence the defendant to life without the possibility of parole, which is mandatory, and then the additional underlying counts to run them consecutive for a total of life without parole, plus 20 and a half years minus 1 day. I'm asking the court to send a message to anyone who may be thinking, like Mr. Romero, that it's okay to come in our community and commit armed robberies. And it's okay to shoot an officer in cold blood and leave the scene to commit another armed robbery. I want this court to send the message that that's not okay. And if it happens in this community, in this courtroom, you will be sentenced to the maximum. Thank you.
Thanks. Your Honor, this is indeed a sorrowful day. Through 3 weeks of testimony, we learned what a fine man Officer Benner was, and the loss is great and tragic. Through the course of the trial and today, we hear many awful things about Andrew Romero, and I'd just like to take a moment to humanize Andrew for just a second, because it has been easy to paint him into a devil and a monster, one who acted for his own self-benefit. Andrew Romero, and this is never going to be an excuse, what you hand down will be mandatory. You've made the ruling, there is no mitigation. But Andrew Romero is a son, he's a grandson, he's a brother, he's human. And he's going to spend the rest of his life in a concrete box. And so the need for retribution has been satisfied. The court will impose, you have to, the life sentence. The Andrew Romero that has been talked about as a monster and so cold-blooded is not the person that Ms. Leos and I have come to know. We have a unique perspective. He's been a respectful young man. He's been quiet and calm in the face of great adversity, great public outcry, great demonization of him in every capacity. And so when we are still dealing with human lives, we are still dealing with a human being who will spend the rest of his life, and he will pay dearly for what the jury found that he did. And perhaps the conclusion that can be reached, if possible, is that the loss is widespread. Andrew has a grandmother, and he has an aunt, and he has sisters who are going to lose their family members. So, understandably, Officer Benner's family lost so very much. The loss in this case extends beyond his family. So, you're going to impose your sentence, and Andrew is going to live with it. He'll spend the rest of his life locked away, and Officer Benner can't be brought back. It's a terrible end to a terrible tragedy, to what would easily be considered a tragic life of Andrew Romero from the very beginning. And so that's why I say that this is quite a sorrowful day.
Anything else from the state?
Your Honor, it's been said that your conscience is what guides you when you think no one's looking or listening. Not only has Mr. Romero shown no remorse during this entire trial, I direct you back to that jail call when he couldn't understand. It's been 2 weeks already. Why are they still talking about it? Get over it. And then when he finds out, yeah, he really did shoot Tabitha Little in the foot, he laughs. There's not 1 ounce of concern in that phone call about the officer or the damage he's done or the lives he's ruined, not even his own. You know, there are a lot of victims in this case, but I'm sorry, Andrew Romero is not one of them. All of the troubles he has, great animosity, the demonization, the outcry, that was caused by him, no one else. And we filed our supplemental information, Judge. You know his history. It's not like he hasn't had chances at rehabilitation before. And he's thrown every one of them away, culminating in the murder of Officer Benner. He went to prison. His first stint in prison was for voluntary manslaughter. Then he had a conviction for contributing to the delinquency of a minor, and then trafficking or distribution, and then possession of a firearm or destructive device by a felon, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, receiving or transferring stolen motor vehicle, and then, of course, the crimes that he committed on the night that he murdered Officer Benner. Judge, sometimes a sentence, while it could be argued, it's life without parole. Why give him any more? Because it's the right thing, Judge. It sends a message. It sends a message that in this court, life without parole isn't even enough. You will get every day that the law entitles this court to give. And that's what I'm asking for, Your Honor. Thank you.
Mr. Romero, you know, I'll follow up with what Ms. Roma stated. I had the opportunity to review your history before I started the sentencing hearing, and it's page after page after page of things you've been doing since you were a juvenile. I have all your history right here. But I also have to follow the law. There's a rule of law, and even if the devil walked in here to be charged with something, I have to give him a fair trial as well. Mr. Romero, I had to make some unpopular decisions in this case to get to the trial. I know some people in here didn't like my decisions, but you're entitled to a fair trial. And the reason I made those decisions is if and when you were convicted, you had very little wiggle room on your appeal. But you are entitled to an appeal. I moved this case out of here to Valencia County. I suppressed certain statements that you made that I felt weren't legal to be brought before you in court. That's required by the law. That's what I had to do. You appointed fine attorneys for you. You got a Cadillac defense when it comes to a murder case. I've done a number of cases, and these two attorneys probably did the finest job I've seen in a court on a murder case. You had a jury review. You had fine people from Valencia County spent 3 weeks of their life listening to the evidence, and they gave you a just decision. The just decision was guilty of all charges. What I would really like to happen to you, I can't say in court because I'd probably be removed from office. But I have to follow the law. And I'm going to say 5 words to you that I hope follow you when you're 30, when you're 40, if you're alive 50 or 60. Those 5 words, Mr. Romero, are you will die in prison. The judgment of the court is as follows. With respect to the murder charge, you're committed to Department of Corrections for the rest of your natural life. With regard to tampering with evidence as charged in count 2, you're remanded to Department of Corrections for 3 years. Count 3, tampering with evidence, an additional 3 years. Shooting at or from a motor vehicle, you will be remanded to Department of Corrections for a period of 9 years. That is a serious violent offense. You does not get hardly any good time on that. Attempt to commit robbery, 3 years. Conspiracy to commit armed robbery, 3 years. Aggravated fleeing a law enforcement officer, 1.5 years. Concealing ID, another half year, for a total of 23 years. Those will run consecutive to each other and consecutive to the life sentence. The other thing I'm going to do, folks, is I'm going to order that this matter commence immediately with whatever time he's doing, for the reason that I don't want him, he's still doing like 10 years or so in the Department of Corrections. I want this to start immediately so that he gets reclassified with a murder conviction on him. That'll be the judgment of the court, and Deputy, you can take him out.
All rise.